Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting, very unusual actually little knife right here. This is the Dutch Bladeworks Xerxes. Very interesting piece. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Dutch Bladeworks for sending this guy along. They actually reached out to me and I just by email said, hey Nick, you know, we've got this new thing coming out. It's kind of weird, you might like it. And sure enough, it was weird, I might like it. I sent him though my full disclosure. Disclaimer that is, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly, might call it a gem, might call it junk. They still sent it along, but nevertheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let any of that affect the nature and substance of my review. But anyways, there you go. Next thing, let's do a size comparison. This is not a small knife at all. Here it is next to your Spyderco Delica. Here it is next to your Ontario Ratnum, but that's a Spyderco PM2, actually. Little known fact. And then here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. This is not a big knife. I'm sorry, this is not a small knife particularly. In terms of sharpened blade length, we are coming in over the length of the PM2 there. And actually, that will be putting it into territory that is a little bit, well, it's a little bit long. We are coming in here over 3.5 inches. We are coming in at like 9.5 centimeters, because it's a European knife. Why not use some reasonable units for a change, right? It is definitely a big freaking knife in that regard. And so this is not a big knife, or I'm sorry, not a small knife. It's actually a thin knife, though. That's actually one comparison I should make, and we'll talk about this thinness a little bit later on. But its thinnest point, it actually comes down to about the size of the Delica, not including the clip. And at its thicker point, it's actually around, it's about PM2 thickness here. So it thins out in a way that's actually quite dramatic. So there you go. Next thing, who are the designers on this guy? You might be able to see inside of there if I do this just right. There we go. Design, Tashi, Gudy. That's right. There are two very famous knife designers involved in this guy. One of them is Tashi Bharucha, who I think anybody looking at this knife would go, Tashi's involved. And then on the other side is Gudy von Poppel, who is a designer I've only had once on the channel with the Editions G Bullet, but whose work is very well known and respected over there in Europe. And so the fact that you've got a collaboration here between two very, very well-known European designers, I'm going to be honest, that's kind of cool. So this has design, chops like freaking crazy going into it, and actually we'll see that shows. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Dutch Bladeworks here, Xerxes. So to start with, one thing I'll highlight is the clip on this thing is really cool. This is a milled clip, make no mistake. If you look at it just from here down, it could look like a spring clip, but this is a fully milled clip. You can see here that it's coming out of one solid piece of titanium. Has this beautiful little top here, which by the way is beautifully rounded off here. I'm going to keep saying things like beautiful and well done, but this is beautiful and well done. But it's milled well enough out that it acts like a spring clip. It has all of the advantages of a spring clip in terms of practical everyday use, but it has all of the aesthetics of a milled clip. And that's a little bit of an extra mile thing. Like I look at this and I'm like, wow, at some level, why not just use a spring clip? But at another level, I realize why. This knife in many places is just going above and beyond for the sake of it. And that's kind of cool. And it also hangs the knife well in the pocket, so that it hangs off to the side like this, keeping the pocket deco, which is definitely there, a little bit out of the way. So that's a nice thing. Next thing, the blade on this guy is good to go. It has a very thin edge, maybe not very thin, but a pretty damn thin edge for modern knife-making standards. It is 20 CV blade steel, as you can see right here. Come on, CPM 20 CV, right there. CPM 20 CV, which is, if not the best blade steel around, it's certainly one of the best, and provided it's done well, yeah, great performance there. It has a neat design. It's sort of this weird parallel, but it's a Persian blade. I mean, the damn thing is named the Xerxes, right? It's going to be a little Persian, but at the same time, it's relatively subtle. The harpoon is really the most interesting and most sort of flashy part of the blade there, but it has this nice swedge on the back of it there. It's a really cool looking blade shape. You've got a little bit of flat here, you got mostly belly, and the tip, but it's not quite so aggro as some of the Persian blades can certainly be out there, so I like that a lot. Next thing, this guy has a great lanyard hole. Have you noticed that lanyard hole? Have you seen that lanyard hole? No, you haven't. That's why it's great. Right there. In the back there, they have a little cutout in the back spacer, which has a little pin in the middle there, which serves also, by the way, to stabilize the handles. This is about as good as a lanyard hole can get. It's going to be right there for somebody who wants it, but it's going to be completely missing for somebody who doesn't. Great, great thing. Ergonomically speaking, it's actually really well done. The clip is well positioned. It's relatively shallow. They've got this nice rounding on here. Honestly, ergonomically, this is pretty good in the hand, and you can actually choke up a little bit if you'd like, if your finger is going to be small enough to fit here. This is good in the hand. Absolutely freaking good to go there. And then finally, on the good side, I could probably keep going on, but the thing is, what's great to me about this knife are the details. This knife, more than maybe a lot of ones on the channel, that's maybe not fair, but one of the things that strikes me most about this knife is the details are there. This is two great designers just going to freaking town on a knife. They are going crazy and just adding in as many details it feels like as they can. And it shows. You know, to start with, you've got like the harpoon on the blade here with this nice swedge, but it's a beautiful line. And in fact, the whole knife has a bunch of these really beautiful lines that are complementing each other and contrasting around. It has, you know, a nice steel label positioning. That's a little thing, but certainly it's a really nice thing when the steel label is visible but subtle, and all of that is good. The fact that they've got that little design credit thing in there, and that's the way they've done it, that's great. The knife is basically sterile, except for the Dutch Bushcraft logo. Dutch Bushcraft is a different channel. This is Dutch Bladeworks. Anyways, that is the fact that those are the only markings on this guy, and then the credits are internal. It's beautiful, and it's kind of it's not flashy. You get people who put their name across the entire freaking blade. No, this is subtle, and I like that a lot. You have the backspacer. This backspacer, I'm a sucker for a good backspacer. To start with, full backspacers are amazing, period. But look at this kind of stuff right here. Look at this little edge right of the backspacer here. Let me try and zoom in a little bit so I can show you this better. Right here, you can see how the backspacer isn't just ending, but it's got little parts of the frame that are milled up to accept it. Similarly, if we look inside here, if we look inside the lanyard hole, that's right, the backspacer goes all the way through. So it's not the case that there's just a hole in the spacer there or something. No, it goes all the way through and it's scooped out beautifully. Then on the backside here, look at this guy. Again, the backspacer doesn't just end. The backspacer is actually fit, like the handles are fit to accept the backspacer. That is an absolutely wonderful thing. Look at the tight tolerances on this end here. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. Look at the edge of this clip here. That's nice. Look at the rounding. Oh, yeah. Absolutely 100%. Now, one of the big things that's very subtle about this knife, because from afar it looks like a big gray mass, right? Like it's all acid wash and stone wash and whatever. But if we look at this little bolster area, we see that we have two grooves, both of which are completely cut on all sides here. So you can see them going all the way up to the back well, up to the hole there. And these two separate grooves cut on a beautiful angle there. Nicely done. But then in addition, you have this wonderful grooving pattern all throughout this guy. 100% of this back surface here, excepting these chamfers, is done with this milling on this. That's really, really freaking nice. And this little bolster look to it, because it looks like it's got bolsters on there, even though it really doesn't. This is all one piece of titanium that's been completely, you know, it's just finished a little differently on here. That's good. It's not a free spinning pivot. It's just beautifully machined, generally speaking. And you can see, by the way, that this groove goes all the way across here and lines up where you're there. Same finish on the screws, and same finish on the clip. Look, there's a lot of really, really nice details here. I can probably keep going on this knife, but the simple thing to say is that this was done by two great knife designers, and it really shows. You can see that both of them were really putting in a lot of effort here, or at least it sure seems like that, to make this guy a little bit above and beyond, and that's a beautiful thing. And so, oh, and by the way, look at this freaking angle right here where it matches on two sides when the knife is closed. Guys, it's good. So, to me at least, that could very easily be the great of this knife, is that the details are 100% there. This is one of those knives that's less and less common in the production world, but where you look closer and closer and you find more and more thinking, rather than a lot of them, particularly on the budget end, but even on the high end sometimes, where you look closer and you realize, oh, they didn't think about that. Or you look closer and you realize, oh, okay, that's the easy way. And so I like very, very much the details, and that brings me to the end of the good here, which is that the details are great, the ergonomics are great, the lanyard hole is awesome, it has a very nice blade, and an awesome clip that works very, very well. On the great side, could just as easily be the details. I've gone back and forth on this, but the thing that is really stands out for me about this knife is something a little bit unusual and different. I'm going to compare it to this knife here. This is the Herman Knives Dragonfly. It just happens to be on the knife on my table. But I'll compare these two knives together for exactly this reason. With the Herman, you can see here both of these knives have what's called a distal taper, meaning that when the blade starts off, it is one thickness, and as it goes out further, it becomes thinner. This is a very good thing to do with a pocket knife. If you don't do that, you end up with something very weird, very thick tip and such. Both of these knives have that distal taper to them. This guy starts off a little thicker, whatever, not a big deal. One thing, though, that is completely different about the construction of these two knives is, first, let's take a look at the Herman, which is done the way that most production knives are, where the blade is one thickness back here, and then it's this much different thickness on the other side here, but the scales remain just as far apart. And so you end up with the tip of the blade here floating in space, basically, where there's really this wide open space around the tip. Is this at all problematic? No, not at all. I think it's a perfectly reasonable way to go about things. I do not interpret my talking differently about the Xerxes as a complaint about everything else. But look at the Xerxes. Starts off at one thickness, and then it maintains the same tolerance along the entire thing, which means that the scales of this knife are actually gradually tapering down together throughout the entire process. This knife starts off at one thickness and ends at a different thickness. The handle of this knife becomes thinner as the blade becomes thinner, because they are so damn dedicated to keeping as little space as possible inside this. This was one of those things that, like I said, practically speaking, does this make a big difference? No, not at all. Does it matter that the backspacer is thicker at one part and thinner at the other? Does it matter that the handle? No, I don't think this has any practical effect on the knife, possibly excepting making it a little thinner in the pocket. But that said, this is neat. This is I give a damn thing. This is somebody going a little bit above and beyond and saying, you know what, you might not even notice this, but holy crap, are we going to do it? I don't know that I've ever seen this in a production knife before. I'm sure some of the knife historians in the comments might be able to come up with a counterexample or two. I'm not claiming that they invented this or anything like that, but this is certainly the first time I've seen this out of WE Knives. And, well, out of because this is made by WE Knives, by the way, but out of a Chinese-made fabrication sort of thing. Never seen anything like this before, and you know what? It is really freaking cool. The fact that they were willing to not only taper the blade, which they should do, of course, but they tapered the handle to fit the blade. I don't know why they did it, but by God, is it awesome that they did. And it's just one more level of this detail that I'm showing you. When you have two great designers who are just like, you know what, screw it, let's go crazy. That's the kind of thing you get, and that's the kind of thing that makes a knife stand out in today's completely oversaturated knife market. And so that's why this knife was very refreshing to me, and that's the great. Is that they're going that extra mile even there too. Bad side. Okay, look, style on this guy, a little controversial. I'm going to be honest, it's not my style. It's kind of cool looking, certainly, and, you know, I'm certainly not casting aspersions at it. I think it's beautifully designed. I hope you get that part. But, you know, it's not going to land well for everybody. My wife likes it a lot. For me, this isn't really something I would want to carry on a regular basis, partly because of the size being a little bit big. But it is, it's not quite where I'm after. But that's okay. That's purely aesthetic. Next thing, the size of this guy. Now, a bunch of people are going to complain, oh, Nick, come on, you're biased. But the thing is, this is right over 3.5 inches. This makes it, and given this is made in the place where inches aren't a thing, but this puts it right over the line for a lot of people to carry. If you've got a 3.5 inch knife law, that extra little bit isn't doing much for you. I do kind of wish they'd back that off a little bit. Next thing, this guy is a bit of a gray mass. What I mean by that is that this entire thing is stonewashed acid something or another. I mean, the blade and the handle, by and large, match. There's slightly different tone, but still. The whole thing is just sort of 50 shades of gray going on here. This is, as a result, it feels maybe a little bit underfinished, that is, relative to some of your other knives at similar price points. This is, by the way, a $425 knife. Maybe I should have said that earlier. But for that kind of a price point, I might expect a little bit more nuance in finishing. I'm willing to acknowledge that this is an aesthetic, and that could be exactly what the designers were going for. They wanted it to be gray so that the details show off. I don't freaking know. But for me, at least, I can imagine, you know, a surface finish that would give just a little bit more presence to some of this beautiful machining. A little bit of polishing or something like that. I mean, this guy with a polished backspace, I don't know. But with a nice satin blade, I feel that would be a little bit more compelling to my personal taste. But again, this is aesthetics. You can consider this biased. That's completely fine. Next thing, the finger choil on this guy works okay for me, but it's actually borderline a little small for me, and I've got smaller hands than most. So for a lot of people, this is going to be a sharpening choil rather than a finger choil. It's very effective at that, certainly, but do keep that in mind. It might be nice if that finger choil was a little bit bigger, or maybe not at all, I don't know, or frankly just, you know, reduce the blade length. Anyways, I digress. But the choil is going to be a little small. Then finally, on the bad side, the price is high. It's $425. And you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I've been struggling with this price a little bit. And not in the sense of like, oh, this is terrible, but in the sense of I really don't know quite where I land. This is a lot of money. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And there were going to be people in the comments, you bourgeois bastard, I would never buy a pocket knife more than 15 bucks, whatever. We hear you, you're good. This knife is up there. It's up there with some of the greats. It's up there with the Shabazzes of the world. It's up there, and it's way, way up there. And fundamentally, it is an overseas made, pocket knife here. But the thing is, at another level, they're doing a lot of stuff here. This is not a knife that I can look at any place and say, wow, that was lazy. Maybe the finishing, but again, that could be their aesthetic, so I'm going to try not to dock them for it. But this is really, and by finishing, I mean like just throw the whole damn thing in a vat of acid and hope it looks okay. That to me is the only area where it's just like, you could have gone a little further. But the thing is, they're trying a bunch of new things with the, taper on the handles. That's completely weird. They're clearly putting in a lot of effort to machine this guy. These little nubbins and things like that, as you see the disassembly even. You see all the effort that they're putting into this guy. This is a very, very, very effortful knife. And so, honestly, it's high, but I don't feel like it's out of line. I don't feel like they're ripping me off. Would it be more compelling, $50, $75 less? Yeah, absolutely. And this also, by the way, could be an import import issue, because they're only being sold right now in the U.S. through, I think, Arizona Custom Knives. And so it could be that importing them makes them more expensive, and they're a better deal in Europe, in which case, by God, go for it. But this is a price that is way up there, but I feel like is actually probably justified. And if I love the aesthetic of this even more, I'd probably be head over heels, even despite it. So the price to me is bad. I'd like it to be lower, but it's not terrible. I think it's going to be okay. And so there you go. So to me, at least, all of that is what's not great here, is that it's $425. It's got a smaller choil than some fingers. For me, at least, it's a bit of a gray mass, and the style's going to be a little controversial. One other thing I'll highlight that I don't think is particularly bad, given everything else, it's not a particularly light knife. It's 5.15 knife. It's 5.15 knife. 5.15 ounces. Here, I'll do it in grams just for the Europeans among us here. No, not troy ounces. 145 grams. There we go. Congratulations, Europe. You're moving on up in my channel. Anyways, sorry. It's pretty heavy. That said, like I said, they're doing so much machining in here that I can't really ding them too hard, but do keep that in mind. But all that's the bad is that it's a little bit heavy. It's a little bit expensive. It's got smaller choil. It's a bit of a gray mass. And the style I don't think is going to land for everybody, but it is damn pretty looking. On the ugly front, honestly, there's nothing really ugly here. It's just pretty well done. And actually, that's my conclusion, is that this is actually a pretty refreshing knife. I think I said that already, but it was really true. When this guy came across my table, I was in, I don't want to say a drought or anything, but, a lot of the stuff I had on my table felt a little bit same old, same old, same old. And that's not an impugning, by the way, anything I've got on my table right now, but at the same time, this was really cool, because I took it out of the box. It was like, okay, looks fine. And, kind of put it aside for a second, because I didn't have any time to spend with it. And then I looked at it more closely. It was just like, oh. It's like the meme with Vince McMahon. Like, holy crap. By the end of it, I was like, wow, they put a lot of effort into here. They've taken something that on the surface looks relatively basic, right? And they've put a bunch of wild stuff in it at a low level. With a great blade, a great clip, really great ergos, and these details over and over again that are just like, wow, that's good. And then this freaking tapering thing, which I don't think I have ever seen in a production folder before. And, sure, the style's going to be a little controversial. The knife is 50 shades of gray at a price point where polished finesse is a little more common. The choil might run a little small for you. It's a little heavy, and it is a lot of money. But for me, it's pretty compelling. I've been flirting back and forth with the idea of this being a gem. At some level, if the price were lower here in the States, it would have crossed the line. Or frankly, maybe this is just my bias. Maybe I just don't love these surface fin. But this is probably a gem. If I were to take out all of my bias against acid washing, I would say this is probably going to land there. Because the simple fact of it is that this is what happens when you put two great designers together with a maker or a manufacturer, however you want to think about it, that is able to do all the crazy things that they're after. This is what happens when you take, a bunch of crazy ideas and you're like, oh, okay, let's do them all. And you end up with something that is so at some level basic, but at another level completely over the top in its detail and its execution, that I really can't complain. This is the kind of thing I'd love to see happening more often in the knife world, particularly the high-end knife world. You know, more design touches. The fact that they can take something that is literally just 20 CV, good steel, and titanium, and they can put this much detail into it in the design process, in the machining process, rather than just like, oh, slap some Damascus on there, etc. That's really cool. And so at the end of the day, this is an absolutely excellent design piece. I think if you are a knife design geek, you're going to love this knife in the same way that I've really appreciated it a lot. And it's really refreshing in a very boring period of time. It's pretty damn cool. And so if you like the style of this, you like the details, you like the gray, and you don't mind the price, then I think 100% this will absolutely be a gem for you. And frankly, even with all of my bias, it might even be a gem for me. So this is a really, really nice knife. Dutch Bladeworks, way to step up to the plate and knock it out of the park the first time. Well freaking done. Good job. And of course, Tashi and Gudy, you know you're good, but you're good. Well done. And I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.